You've been up and about on the ground getting a sense of how this economy is doing with ordinary South Africans in the Joburg CBD and elsewhere. But when you take a step back and you look at some of the emerging economies, you look at Venezuela, for instance, and how Hugo Chavez, on a populist ticket, socialist ticket, got into power. Nicolas Maduro is now in power. You go far east to the Philippines, to places there, you got people like Duterte, who got on in populism. You go to Washington, D.C., you find Donald Trump as well, who's got into the White House using the populism kind of ticket. In South Africa, are we at the risk of populism creating some political instability that will affect our economic prospects?
Well, Dan, certainly speaking to the analysts that I've spoken to and also engaging with the politicians that are steering the ship, as it were, there is a temptation to flirt with populism, especially with an election just around the corner. And I know that the immediate fallback to is to say that land reform is being approached in a populist manner. I think maybe that's a bit of a misnomer, because that being, as the president said, the original sin, it needs to be dealt with whether we like it or not. But certainly the temptation by politicians, when in time of need, when they need to woo a skeptical electorate, is to fall back on populist policies, perhaps trying to put forward economic policies that they simply know they cannot afford. I mean, Venezuela is certainly an example, but yes, you look at the protectionism of the United States, and even north of our border as well. I mean, Zimbabwe has certainly been guilty of pursuing populist policies in the name of political expediency. But in many ways, besides the political opportunism that is involved with populism, we also have to look at the stability at the end of the day. If we are going to address any economic challenges in the South African economy, or any economy the world over, you need political stability. And some may argue that South Africa, whether we like it or not, is seeing serious political instability within the ANC itself. The Nasrec Elective Conference delivered a very mixed masala, divided leadership, and in the recent weeks we've seen these cracks starting to emerge.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned Nasrec, and I think the term we often go back to is the Ramaphoria of it all. And I suppose many South Africans probably sitting this morning or sitting back recently going like, but actually really, what's he doing? Is he doing the right thing? Is he saying the right thing and saying things to the right people? And what's happening within the ANC as well? I mean, so much that's going on there. Do we actually trust what's happening with our governing party, and can we trust them come next year?
Well, indeed. I mean, they need to walk the talk now, because an election is just around the corner. One school of thought is that President Ramaphosa and his attempts to reform the South African economy and the South African political system is leaving him with his hands tied, because we had there wasn't one slate that won outright in Nasrec. So Ramaphosa is in many ways confined and needing to, maybe take 2 steps forwards and 1 step back in many ways. And we've seen things come to the fore, at least in the past fortnight, with these allegations of a plot, with Secretary General Ace Magashule meeting with former President Jacob Zuma and the ousted Northwest Premier Supra Mahumapelo at the Maharani down in Durban. And just having a look at how Ace Magashule, the Secretary General, addressed ANC Youth League members in Durban a couple of months before that, when he mentions things like returning the ANC to its rightful place, one gets the sense that certainly unity is not front of mind when it comes to the ANC Secretary General.
It's just a matter of 5 years. It's a matter of 5 years. It's a matter of 5 years, comrade.
You see, part of this instability, he says we've got 5 years, comrades, as he said in that clip, and we're going to be taking the ANC back. Because every 5 years we've got to go to elections in the country. So party politics, governing party, majority governing party, political instability will always affect the national psyche.
Indeed, and I mean, whether we like it or not, right? Since 1994, the ANC has ruled South Africa. They've made many mistakes, but there's also been progress in the making. And political analysts from various persuasions would more or less agree that the ANC has been a party that, despite its faults, has led South Africa in the democratic era, and now is faced with a crossroads once again in terms of political instability and infighting itself. In response to Ace Grace Makhashule's saying that he needs to, the ANC needs to return to the party that its members know. Cyril Ramaphosa didn't mince his words at the recent Kasatu elective Congress when he addressed these plot allegations, saying that if there's going to be a plot against anything, it needs to be a plot against poverty.
We should not spend time on counter-revolutionary machinations of weakening this African National Congress, where either in dark corners or wherever we come up with machinations of weakening the African National Congress. That must come to an end. Now, comrades, I'd like to say this now. If there is going to be any plot, it must be a plot to defeat poverty. That must be the type of plot that we want.
Well, finally, Nickolaus, before I let you go, that man who just spoke there, let's plot against poverty, is he the man to provide that certainty that markets and investors are looking for to assist, and I mean, from a political perspective, for them to invest in our economy?
I think he's trying to make a decent enough job out of it at the moment. I mean, we've seen Cyril Ramaphosa trying to tout his skills as getting everybody from diverse backgrounds and standpoints into one room and agreeing on at least one way forward. The proof is going to be in the pudding in the year that lays ahead. Even if we have an early election, we haven't seen Cyril Ramaphosa prove himself in terms of actual progress in the economy, actual progress when fighting things like poverty, inequality, and also even political uncertainty within his own party.